and gentlemen, esteemed professors, it's a great pleasure for me that I can present here today. It was said I will talk about property taxes and especially about property taxes as a possible tool to consolidate budgets of our countries in the region. But especially underlying the situation in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So for a bit of a context, as a beginning, in the latest years, and I'm sure it was already mentioned yesterday, the latest years were quite turbulent from an economic budgetary perspective due to the COVID crisis, energy crisis, and also certain policy decisions taken by our government, which led to overspending and led to holes in the budgets of our countries. This was especially true for the Czech Republic and Slovakia, where in both countries during the course of the last year there was a consolidation plan introduced. And given that states were not really keen on decreasing expenditures, it was very quickly clear that states needed to look for supplementary revenue for the state budget. And among others, the supplementary revenue was, it was at least proposed to be found in property taxes. Which were mentioned in both recovery plans in the Czech Republic and Slovakia as well. And they were mentioned in connection with an alleged high untapped taxing potential. And why was it so? Because property taxes, both in Slovakia and the Czech Republic, create really low revenues. They are purely local taxes. It means that all the revenue goes to municipal budgets. They are either unit-based or fixed unit value-based, meaning that the legislator, when they drafted the act, they allocated some kind of a unit value for example, 1 square meter. But this is a rather artificial value, not a real value. Which is already very old, so it needs an update. So it functions practically as a fixed unit-based tax. And also these taxes have relatively numerous exemptions. So what was initially proposed in both countries? Essentially 3 points. One, that we should sharply increase property taxes. Two, that we should turn them into shared taxes between state and municipalities, and 3, that we should introduce a value-based system instead of the unit-based system. Now I would like to go through these 3 points and reflect upon them and share my thoughts with you concerning them. Moving to the first point, the question is whether an increase in property taxes in general is justified. Well, if we look at the share of tax on property as a percent of total GDP, the latest data are available for 2021, according to the OECD. I'm not sure whether it is clearly visible. The last chart, the last column, the green one, is the OECD average, and it shows that the tax on property in the OECD countries on average is nearly 2% of total GDP. And then we can compare now the 4 Visegrad countries. The purple one, or the magenta one to the left, is the Czech Republic, 0.2. The second one, the blue, is Slovakia, 0.46. Then Hungary comes 0.87, Poland 1.28. So I'm really sorry. I know that some people don't like the word Czechia here. It's not my fault. I wanted to put there Czech Republic, but unfortunately the OECD uses Czechia as official name for the Czech Republic, so that's it.
Adam, you are my PhD student. Our papers, we will use Czech Republic.
Definitely, we will definitely change it.
And our OECD will use
So what we can see definitely here is that the tax on property in Czech Republic and also Slovakia is really low, and is really up for a boost. The same picture is when we compare it to the percentage of total taxation. I will not mention now the numbers. It's absolutely visible that it's a fraction of the OECD average, both in Slovakia and the Czech Republic. So due to this, in my opinion, the increase in property taxes is justified and necessary, because I think that the burden that is represented by these taxes is so low that people don't even consider it at all. Let's say in my hometown, for example, in Slovakia, the property tax, annual property tax for one flat is around 30 euros per year, which is like really the fraction, maybe the 1/20th or 1/15th of a monthly rental fee. So it's laughable, and I'm not sure that it's right this way. But what about the other 2 points? Should the revenue from property taxes be shared between the state and the municipalities? Now, this is a harder question in my opinion, and I think that from a conceptual point of view, this would not be a fortunate move. Why? Because property taxes, especially the residential ones, are ideal local taxes because they have strong local nature. Their source of revenue is strongly connected to one locality, so the flat itself is in the local jurisdiction, the territory of a municipality. They are cheap and easy to administer, one of the cheapest ones, so this is a tax that is appropriate to assign to local bodies, because they are simple in construction and really hard to avoid. The flat is there, you cannot hide it, you cannot lie that it's not there. And the third is that it has a meaningful connection to local public services. This means that property taxes are really an ideal source to finance road construction, public lighting, municipal security, kindergarten, playgrounds, etc., etc. These revenues, I think, are the closest, or have the closest link to these activities or services. So, what would happen if the state would take its part from property tax revenues? What will happen is that municipalities will lose their space to increase these taxes for their own good, and they really need it because they themselves have a really aggravated financial situation at the moment. If they are unable to do so, then the state will be forced to compensate municipalities anyway. So the state may take one part and then as a next step give it at least part of it back to the municipalities. So this only leads to a more a complicated structure. And also a threat is a potential breach of European Charter of Local Self-Government, which prescribes that at least a part of local revenue should be from local taxes. In Slovakia, in Czech Republic, the only meaningful local tax is a property tax. And the fourth one is that property taxes will lose their position as an important tool of accountability. This means that essentially property tax functions as a responsibility and a check for mayors, for example, or the council, municipal councils. If they politically decide to decrease or increase it, then they should bear the consequences, political consequences. If we take this responsibility from them, then I really don't know what will remain from the financial perspective for them as some kind of a responsibility. So, in my opinion, to sum up, I think that it would be not a fortunate idea to share the revenues of property taxes between state and municipalities, and they should remain purely local. And the last point is whether we should introduce a value-based system, which has definitely its pros and cons, and I'm sure that why it was proposed is the first pro, which is listed, is that it would bring a higher revenue yield, which really tends to bring a higher revenue yield. However, it is, on the other hand, much harder to administer. It is expensive and complex to establish. Now we don't really have a functioning system of property value, some map or something, portal where experts would estimate the values, and it should be created, and it costs really a lot of money initially as well, and not even to talk about the updates. And of course, they are prone to legal disputes. Well, if someone doesn't agree with the value, then maybe he could turn to a court, which makes the collection much more complicated. Of course, it looks great, it looks advanced because many developed countries use it. And we could also talk about other pros. But I think that in our region, where local governments are chronically underfinanced, especially lately due to the turbulences I was talking about, and the strong fragmentation, so really small municipalities that do not really have resources and do not really have a qualified personnel to carry out such reform, they would just be unable to do it. And this expensive switch I was talking about to create the map and evaluate everything, it would have to be financed by the state. And this causes also even more budget expenditure. So we just want to lower our expenditures, and we lower it by initially inflating it, essentially. This doesn't really make sense. So in my opinion, the same effect we strive for, the higher revenues, could be achieved in a cheaper way by keeping the unit-based system, the simple one we have now, and raising instead the tax rate or giving more flexibility to municipalities to decide themselves upon the final tax amount. So I think that the value-based system should not be introduced. And as a conclusion, the question of my presentation, the core question, whether property taxes can be used for budgetary consolidation. Yes, they can be used and they should be used, but for the budgetary consolidation of the sub-central government level and not the central government level, because that is what it was invented for and what it is ideal for. Increasing the tax burden, of course, is, as we said, logical and necessary, but we should think about it in a more broader picture, and especially the state policymakers, that if municipalities get more money from property taxes, then it indirectly relieves essentially the state, because municipalities will require less central transfers as a form of aid, essentially, instead of property tax. And I think that what happened in the Czech Republic recently, what the changes that were introduced, they were at least partially right. So they went into the right direction. Instead of going into the value-based direction, they stayed at the unit-based system, and they raised the rates, and they gave more flexibility to municipalities. And I think this should be the way in Slovakia as well, if we decide to go for it. So thank you very much for your attention.